Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Express. I'm Heath Cummings. He's Dave Richard. We're breaking down week 4 winners and losers now. Let's go, Dave. Who was your biggest winner of week 4?
It's weird how I go about winners and losers, Heath. I don't just want to name the guy that's got the best stats. I want to name
Right.
players that can be winners for fantasy managers moving forward. I think DeAndre Swift is a winner. I think fantasy managers, after the first 3 weeks of the season, seeing his terrible numbers, came alive in a multitude of ways against the Rams. Big runs, 7 targets, 7 catches, really looked great. And it looked like he was a focal point of the Bears offense. Did lose out on a short yardage touchdown to Roschon Johnson. Khalil Herbert didn't play at all in the game. So it looks like this Bears run game that had 3 guys was down to 2 guys, and Swift was the main guy. Hopefully you've still got him on your team. He's going to have some good matchups moving forward. They've got Carolina in week 5. That's going to be something that you're going to want to start Swift in, especially with bye weeks kicking in.
Yeah, the way I wrote it up today was, we talked about last week, it was definitely going to be a committee. It was still kind of a committee, but the narrative seemed to switch like Thursday or Friday, that not just it was going to be a committee, but he was going to lose his RB1 job. That was nowhere close to true. Led the team in target share today. Speaking of target share, one of my biggest winners, Josh Downs, has been, and I'm not going to say he's a big winner because Anthony Richardson got hurt. Hopefully Anthony Richardson is back. I will say both Michael Pittman and Josh Downs will be better off for fantasy if Joe Flacco is starting next week. But we've seen the first 2 weeks since Downs came back, he's led the Indianapolis Colts, or tied with Michael Pittman in terms of target share, and has actually been more efficient with his targets than Pittman. Downs looks like, and it's funny, when I first did the projections this week, Downs came out as a mid wide receiver 3. Pittman was actually behind him. I think both those guys might be startable if Flacco is the quarterback in week 5.
We will definitely talk about that when you guys check out the main show. We'll have the stats on those receivers with Joe Flacco. Most of them were with Flacco. Flacco has always seemed to have a guy.
Yeah.
Right? When we've saw him with the Jets and then with the Browns, he had a guy. Maybe Downs is his guy.
You had another winner, and he was a wide receiver, one of my favorite rookie wide receivers. Tell the people, Dave, about Brian Thomas.
He really looked great. The Jaguars did the smart thing. They stopped throwing to Gabe Davis. And while Christian Kirk had 12 targets, 7 catches, Kirk caught a touchdown. It's short throws. He's not making a lot of explosive plays. Brian Thomas is making explosive plays, but he's also catching 2-yard touchdowns from Trevor Lawrence like he did against the Texans. I think he will become the number 1 receiver for Jacksonville. He might already be the number 1 receiver for Jacksonville, but 9 targets, 6 catches, 86 yards with the tutty. I think that we should start looking at him as a borderline wide receiver 2-3 type player moving forward.
I had a rookie wide receiver as a winner as well, Xavier Legette. 10 targets, 6 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown, 19 PPR fantasy points in his first game without Adam Thielen. And you might say, well, yeah, but Andy Dalton threw the ball 40 times. Listen, the Panthers are terrible, and Andy Dalton's going to get the ball out. He might throw the ball to 40 times in a lot of games moving forward. A 25% target share for the rookie. He's still behind Brian Thomas, but not someone that I was really ranking as even a good flex this week. And I think moving forward, we can kind of view him as a boom bust flex for next week. And then if he verifies that 10 targets for a second week in a row, we're going to start talking about him in the Brian Thomas range, maybe in the Xavier Worthy range. We might talk about that in just a second. But as one of those guys that has top 20 upside on a weekly basis, but still has the floor to be a flex. Let's take a short break, and then we'll get to losers. We're back with our losers, Dave. Not everyone was a winner, and I actually had 2 Kansas City Chiefs as losers today. Patrick Mahomes loses Rashee Rice. We don't know for how long, but Andy Reid was asked at halftime, and he said, it's not good. So Patrick Mahomes says, we hope to have him back before the end of the season. Fantasy managers should probably not expect that they will. Carson Steele, oh my gosh, Dave, dusty Kareem Hunt comes into the game. And it's like, was Carson Steele running in a mud pit? Why is Kareem Hunt so much faster than he is? The difference was stark. Steele fumbled again. Yeah. I don't think we'll see another game with double-digit touches for Carson Steele, probably in his career, but definitely in this season. I'm going to hold on to Steele for one more week. and see what it looks like next week. But I'm expecting I'll be dropping him before I'm starting him again in fantasy football. The question is, are people going to be dropping Patrick Mahomes? Because he's not been a QB1 for fantasy football for basically a full season worth of games. He's now lost his number 1 wide receiver, his number 1 running back, and technically his number 2 wide receiver in Marquise Brown. Are you going to drop Patrick Mahomes, Dave?
Let me ask you this question. I'm going to answer your question with a question. Next week, it's New Orleans on Monday night at home. I think that should be okay for him, but I don't know if we've got evidence that suggests that Patrick Mahomes can be anywhere close to what the expectations were when the season started. If he has another bad game against the Saints in week 5 and they're on bye in week 6, they play at San Francisco in week 7. Do you carry Patrick Mahomes through his bye week with the idea of using him in week 7 against San Francisco? It's crazy to think about. I actually hate this because he's a legend. Okay. But this is fantasy. Stats are what matters. And right now he's not coming through with the stats that matter. I think there's a case to be made. Certainly the smaller the league that you're in, the more likely that Mahomes can be dropped. And it sounds silly. There will be weeks where it comes back to bite me in the behind, but I think you could do it in those smaller leagues.
So I don't think in the smallest of leagues, your losers are droppable, but they are definitely concerning, at least in terms of their usage and rush share this week.
I thought we were done with the whole Bijan Robinson's going to lose work to Tyler Algier. I did not see if there was an injury involved for why Tyler Algier had one more carry and played a lot in the game against New Orleans. Bijan played 61% of the snaps, Algier 41%, no snaps inside the 10. Nervous about Bijan. I think fantasy managers are going to start asking questions about whether or not they should start him. They will continue to start him, but he might be more of a number 2 running back moving forward. He's got Tampa Bay in week 5. That's not going to be easy. Carolina in week 6. And then it's Seattle in week 7. If Seattle's D-line is still bad, then I think you'll still feel okay about Bijan Robinson. And the same thing kind of happened with Josh Jacobs. He had one more carry than Emmanuel Wilson, and he was better than Emmanuel Wilson in the game. But Jordan Love's back, and they fell behind, and Jordan Love just took over. Jacobs didn't have game script in his favor, did catch 4 passes, but another player that fantasy managers, myself included, took early on in drafts thinking he's going to be the engine of that Green Bay offense, and now he just hasn't come through. Good news, he does play at the Rams in week 5. We just saw DeAndre Swift look like a Hall of Famer against the Rams.
I will say this was the second consecutive week where it looked like a timeshare between Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson. Emmanuel Wilson's been half a yard better per carry and a full yard better per target than Josh Jacobs this season. And Matt LaFleur has a long, long history of having a 1A and a 1B running back, including with Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis at one point.
I wrote about this in lineup decisions, Heath. Last week's game for Green Bay showed the coaching staff that they've got 2 capable runners. And we saw the usage today kind of lean in that direction. It wasn't Josh Jacobs dominating snaps, dominating touches, the kinds of things that we thought were going to happen. He did play 61% of the snaps. He did dominate inside the 10 and on third down. So emptier snaps for Emmanuel Wilson, but it's not the workload that we want for Jacobs. Maybe there's a big bounce back game next week. Bounce back game. But I'm talking about big. Like, can he get 200 yards and a touchdown against the Rams?
Hope so.
That from him now.
That's going to do it for Fantasy Football Today Express. I'm Heath. He's Dave. If you're watching on YouTube, the big show is starting in minutes. If you're listening on the podcast, we'll talk to you tomorrow.